Alright guys, we are back in my garage for another video, and today we are going to be doing a transmission service on my F30 340i. Now for those of you that don't know, a transmission service is basically the same thing as an engine oil service. So just like you would replace your oil and your oil filter for your engine, we're going to be replacing the transmission fluid and the transmission filter on our transmission. Now the transmission fluid is pretty simple. I'm going with OEM ZF fluid for now. And I've got an OEM transmission filter, which basically is the transmission pan itself. The filter is built into it, so we're going to replace the entire pan in order to replace the filter. Now this process is pretty much the same for all ZF8 HP transmissions. I have an HP50 in my car, but if you have an HP51, an HP70, 76, etc., this will be pretty much the same process for you as well. So I'm going to go ahead and do this service on my car and show you guys how to do it in case you are interested, and hopefully you find this video useful.
Now, as always, for everybody that's new to the channel, I create these videos to help keep you updated on the latest developments in our community, as well as discuss technical topics so that we have a better understanding of how our engines work. So if you're interested in more videos like that, be sure to subscribe because there will be a lot more coming out in the future.
Now, real quick, before we dive into it, I'm going to talk about the elephant in the room. This is obviously not something that BMW would typically do. If you look at the maintenance intervals for our car, they actually specified the transmission fluid as lifetime fluid. So that means that they expect your car's transmission to last as long as the rest of the car without replacing the fluid. Honestly, I can't lie, I don't hear about a lot of transmissions failing due to this, and I think they've probably done their testing in order to validate this for themselves, but that is assuming that you are driving your car like most typical F30s out there, which is just driving to and from work, maybe flooring it every once in a while to get around somebody, but not the way that a lot of us drive our cars and build our cars. So if you're really going to be pushing your car and pushing a lot of power, in my case, I'm getting ready to take it to the track. My car might have questionable history as well. I don't know what the previous owners did. So all of those things together, it just made me decide that I want to do this transmission service for peace of mind. And plus, ZF themselves recommend doing it every 100,000 kilometers or 62,000 miles, which I just happen to be literally right at 62,000 miles. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. Like I said, give me some peace of mind as I continue my build. It's not something that'll hurt your car at all, but if you're buying a car that has 100,000 miles, 120,000, whatever, and you don't know if the transmission has been touched, I don't necessarily think it's a ticking time bomb. Just feel free to jump in and do the service when you're comfortable so that you know what the future maintenance of your vehicle looks like. So let's go ahead and get it started.
So the first thing that we want to do is jack up the car on all four corners. You want it to be as even as possible because just like your engine does not have an oil dipstick, your transmission doesn't have a dipstick either. So the only way that you know that you are filling it up to the right fluid level is you're literally going to fill it up in the fill hole until it's overflowing. That fill hole is positioned right on the side of the transmission at the perfect spot. So when it's overfilling, it's basically at the right level. So if the car isn't level, then that position of where the hole is on the side of the trans is no longer accurate, no longer relevant, and can't make sure that you're filling it up enough. So that's why you just want to make sure all four corners are at the same height. I'm using the same jack stands. They're different colors, but I basically set them to the same height on all four corners, and that just makes sure that the car is level. And then we'll get under the car to do the rest of the service. Now, once you're under the car, you're going to want to remove this big panel that is covering up the transmission. So just go all the way around the perimeter, remove all of those 8mm screws, and then you'll be able to move this plastic tray out of the way. Now, after you've removed the transmission cover, we're going to go ahead and begin draining the fluid. So we've got our catch pan under here, and this is our drain plug. So you just use a 10mm Allen and untwist that, and it will begin to drain the fluid. And don't worry about this one. The new transmission pan will come with its own drain plug, so you don't have to save it or anything. Doesn't look too black or anything. I wonder if the previous owner actually replaced it. Maybe. But I'm just going to replace it for peace of mind. Now we'll let that finish draining, but we're going to remove the whole transmission pan anyway. So I'm just going to go ahead and start removing these bolts all the way around the perimeter. They're going to be a T40 Torx. And again, these bolts should be new if you bought a kit, like I bought a kit from FCP Euro, so it replaces all these bolts. And BMW recommends a specific pattern to remove them. I don't really think it matters, but if you want to follow that pattern, there it is. So we'll remove all the bolts around the transmission pan and then drop the entire thing. Try to make sure any extra fluid gets in your catch pan so you don't make too much of a mess. You can see it's still dripping a lot, so we're going to go ahead, go straight to grabbing the new oil pan. You do want to kind of wipe down all these surfaces all the way around if you can, just to make sure you have a clean mating surface for the new gasket. And then we will reinstall it with the new screws. Also kind of cool just to take a peek at all the internals and see just how complex this transmission is. So eat your heart out. So I'm just kind of hand starting some of these to get it in place, and we'll torque it down by hand just to snug it up to the actual transmission pan and hold it in place. And then when you do your actual torquing, you're going to want to follow the torquing sequence that's recommended by BMW. That just makes sure that you get an even amount of force and torque all the way around the perimeter of the engine. So just follow that recommendation by BMW so you can make sure you get nice, even distribution of the force around the perimeter of the transmission pan. Now the last thing that we need to do is fill up the transmission. So this is the fill point right here. We're going to loosen this plug and then fill this up with fluid until it's overflowing. Now the only issue is, in order to get an accurate reading on the fuel level, the transmission needs to be up to operating temperature. So filling it up while it's cold will just allow us to get into the car, turn it on, and get the transmission up to temperature. And then we'll continue topping it off again until it's overflowing. The recommendation from BMW is to start filling it up while the transmission is between 30 and 40 degrees Celsius. And by the time you're done, it should not be above 50 degrees Celsius. So don't let it get too hot either. But you're kind of going to need to monitor it from inside the car. You can use a tool like Bimmerlink or ISTA to monitor your transmission temperature and then make sure that you're filling it up without the car getting too hot. If it's in the summertime, you might actually be able to do this without too much work, because if it's hot enough where you are, then you won't have to worry about waiting for it to get up to temperature. But if it's cold, then you'll really need to let the car run for a little while. So we're going to put this 8mm Allen in here, break it loose, and then I've got 7 liters of ZF OEM fluid, and I'm just going to use a transfer pump to start filling this up. And you should have a new fill plug, again, if you got your kit from FCP Euro, so you don't necessarily need to save this. So this is kind of how it will look when you filled it up all the way. I'm not even pumping it right now, and there's just like a steady stream of fluid coming out. So that tells me that it is full. So what we're going to do is go ahead, take out our little transfer, and put in our drain plug. And you don't have to go crazy with this. You basically just want it to be tight enough so that there's no leak. Because again, we're going to go back in the car, turn on the engine, and heat up the transmission. And then we'll actually need to remove this again to begin topping it off with some more fluid. So we are now in the car. I'm basically just running it and letting the transmission get up to temperature. I'm monitoring my transmission temperature with Bimmerlink, so I'm able to see what the actual temperature is, and when it gets to around 40 degrees Celsius, then I'll know that I can get back under the car and continue filling it up. Now also, just to help motivate the fluid to flow through everything, it's a good idea to kind of shift through the different transmission modes. So we've got the car in drive with my foot on the brake. We can go to reverse with my foot on the brake. Go to neutral. So you go to drive, go over to manual mode. Car's in second gear, downshift to first gear. Go up to second. It won't let me go past third since I'm stationary, but you know, just kind of go through all of those things so that the car can kind of load up all the actuators, get fluid flowing through everything that it can, and then when we get back under the car, it should take a little bit more fluid to completely fill it up when it's up to temperature. Now, of course, just be really careful at this point because everything's really hot. You've got the exhaust right here, so a lot of parts are just waiting to burn you and give you a really bad time. But we're slowly going to keep pumping fluid in until it starts overfilling again. Alright, so it looks like we got our steady stream again. I'm just at the end of this bottle, so I'm basically just giving it whatever it'll take. I figure if anything, slightly overfilled is better than slightly underfilled. And then we get our drain plug, put that back on here, again without burning yourself. We should be good, and we will tighten that down as well. There's of course the torque spec from BMW that you should follow. And then I think we'll just wipe it down too, since there's a little bit of fluid on everything. So at this point, you're basically just going to take your little panel, put that back onto the transmission, clean up any oil that you spilled, take the car for a drive. If you want, you can double check the transmission fluid level like a day later. So basically, again, just come back after going for a drive, and once it's within the operating range, you can loosen that drain bolt or the fill bolt on the side of the transmission and try to add a little more fluid to see if it'll take any more. But for me, I basically went through 4 bottles. My kit from FCP came with 7, so I only had 4 liters of fluid actually go in, and you know, it was overflowing, and that was at what, 42 or 43 degrees Celsius. So I think that's pretty much it is what it is. Just keep in mind that you'll never actually drain all of the fluid out of the transmission because there's always going to be some in the components and things like that. So, you know, just fill it up within the factory spec. And if you have extra fluid, you can keep that on hand just in case you ever need to top it off in the future. But yeah, I think that's it for this video. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope this helps. And if you have any other questions or comments, leave them down below.
Daddy, what is this doing?
We are putting fluid in the transmission.
Oh, I know that one. I know what can it do. Fluid keep the engine nice and cool at 30 seconds or something like that.
Something like that.